Today's video is sponsored by Uppercase Designs. What's up YouTube, and welcome to another draw along with me. Well, today we're going to create this space theme design. Now as always, there's links to everything you're going to need over on my Patreon, the canvas size, the free palette, and anything else that you may or may not need for today's design. Now stay tuned right till the very end of the tutorial where we actually go ahead and change the design, and we just add in a couple of more punchy tones like you can see here compared to the previous one. So stay tuned right till the very end just to make sure you don't miss out on that. And also make sure to not miss out on my exclusive tutorials that I post over on my Patreon. I post 3 exclusive tutorials every single month to my Patreon supporters, and the catalogue sits over 100 at the time of recording. As always, there'll be a link to that in the description down below if you want to check that out. And of course, make sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram, Facebook, etc. But make sure to come and join me over on Discord. It's completely free to join in one of the best spaces on the internet. I said it, for you to come and share your work with other Procreate enthusiasts. Everything, of course, again, linked down below. Enjoy today's design, and let's get started. But before we do, I want to introduce you to the Nimble Grip 2. Not only does this grip provide 2 varying swooped edges for comfort when writing or drawing, but this new version has also been engineered around the Apple Pencil's native features. It now boasts a new design that includes a flat edge, which allows you to use the Apple Pencil's native features, such as the double tap feature where you can double tap to switch between an app's tools, for example. And my favorite part, you can now charge the Apple Pencil without having to take off the grip. How awesome is that? Now, if you want to check out the Nimble Grip 2 for yourself, I'll leave a link to it in the description down below where you can find all the different colors that it comes in. And with that said, let's get back to the video. So once you've created your canvas, the first thing you're going to want to go ahead and do is go up to your actions. We'll go to our canvas tab and we will add a drawing guide temporarily. So we'll add a drawing guide, we'll edit that drawing guide. And I know the canvas size is a little bit different, but if we still set our grid size to 500 and hit done, we'll get this grid formation in the middle. And that just allows you to lay out your design against mine. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and go to our layers. We'll go to our background color and we'll grab this color in the bottom right of the palette. We'll hit done. Now you may need to go back to your actions in canvas and drawing guide and potentially pick a color like a pink, which we can then see against the rest of our canvas. So I'll just increase the opacity there for you as well and hit done. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and make sure our color is set to white in the top left of the palette for a moment. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to go to calligraphy and the monoline brush. And it doesn't matter what your brush size is, all you need to do is make a circle that does not go beyond the boundaries of your canvas. So draw a circle, hold your pen, pop a finger on the screen, and then drag and drop the color in. Now what we need to do is we need to actually go ahead and tap on our cursor and then tap on the top right node here. And we want to change the size of this to 3100. So it'll scale up in size. Once you've done that, you can then move it up and over towards this top right area of our canvas. So we're looking for sort of the points in which mine sort of joins and leaves our canvas. And that's looking pretty bang on. I'm going to leave that, I think, as that is, and maybe even tap it slightly to the left a few times just to nudge it across, but tap on my cursor when I'm done. So now we've got our planet shape. We can then go ahead and start to add in some colors to it. Now we're actually going to want to go up to our actions first of all and edit our drawing guide here. So we're going to tap on actions, canvas, and edit drawing guide. We're going to pick isometric and we're going to make sure the grid size, if you tap here, is set to 500 and hit done. Pick a color that you can see from this little spectrum up here and hit done. And now what you'll see is you'll see these lines both vertically and slightly at a sort of diagonal angle. If we go back to our layers and we create a new layer and we tap on it and clipping mask it to the white shape of our planet, and we tap on this layer and use the drawing assist, it's going to use those lines as a guide. So you have to draw in those directions. And that'll be really handy in a second. So what we'll do is we'll swipe from left to right here. We'll keep things nice and organized and we'll rename this group and we'll call it Planet. And once we've done that, we're going to go ahead and go to this layer here that's assisted. We're going to go to our color. We're going to grab the color in the top left of the palette. And then we're going to go to our brush. We're going to go to painting and the Salamanca brush. And we're going to set the size to 72%. Now for the moment, if we tap away, our sort of planet here is in white. It's only temporary for a moment. I just want you to do this layer now and you'll be able to bring in some color. Now we're aiming to draw here, and watch how I draw. It's not allowing me to draw beyond the sort of grid system here of our isometric design. So once I've got a few in here and I can kind of just see the effect and the sort of side here of the planet, we can quickly just jump back to the bottom layer here, go to your colors, grab this color in the bottom right of the palette and drag it into there. Because now you've got your purple, you can see the edge of your planet. Now we're going to go ahead and go back to that layer again, go back to your color in the top left of the palette, and let's carry on. So we're just looking to layer on top a few streaks here. Notice how I'm not going to go completely up into the top right. You can if you want to, it's not too much of a problem. We will introduce a layer shortly to bring that down a few tones. But what I'm primarily looking to do is add in all these kind of streaks and create this beautiful effect like so. So I'm starting outside of the planet shape, scraping along with the Salamanca brush, creating all these lovely, awesome textures. And once we've done that, we can move on to the second color. So we'll create a new layer. We'll tap on it, clipping mask it, tap on it, and we'll drawing assist it as well. So it follows the same guides as what we drew a second ago. Let's go to our colors and grab the middle color in the first column. We want to change the brush size down to the 24% marker. And now what we're going to try and achieve is adding in some additional color strokes in here. So I'm keeping the pressure fairly light just to start with. I want to build up some additional variations in the hues, introducing this blue tone in here. Can definitely get some sort of in this bottom area here. Leave gaps in between. It's not a matter of covering the entirety of the planet, but just adding in some nice variation to the color tones. And you can push them way up into the top right if you want to. But something like this. Look at how we've got this beautiful layered effect, and maybe try and focus a certain area with a little bit more of this color tone. What we'll then do is we'll go to our layers, we'll create another new layer, tap on it, clipping mask it, we'll tap on it and drawing assist it. We'll go to our colors again and we'll grab the color in the bottom left of the palette, and then we'll go to our brush size and we're going to bring that all the way down to around about the 7% marker here. We're then going to go ahead and introduce some further color tones. So very small lines now, as you can see, somewhat sporadically sort of placed through our planet, adding in some interesting color tones. Now, one thing you may or may not want to do is you may want to go back to certain layers, for example. So if you grab your eraser, tap on your eraser and change it to painting and the Salamanca, we'll just bring the brush size down to say around about sort of the 9 or 10%. And you may want to go back through some layers such as maybe this sort of second tone we introduced, and maybe just get rid of a few of it if you want to reintroduce some of the darker tones and some of the purples. The variations will really help your design and give you some balance. Likewise, I could even go back down to the purples as well at the very beginning. Now that obviously may introduce too much of a dark tone, so press really lightly if you can, if you want to introduce some additional sort of tones in here, just for some extra sort of depth and effect here. I'm just going to go through occasionally just with a few little erasing marks. So we're then going to go back to our layers. We're going to go right up to the very top, create a new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it only, and change the blend mode from normal to overlay. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the purple in the top left of the palette. We'll go to our brush and airbrushing and soft brush. We'll set the brush size to something maybe around about sort of the 15% mark. And we're going to introduce some purple around this sort of left-hand side, a little bit up towards this top left, because our light source is going to be up here in a moment. So going to try and bring in like a blanket of purple that comes across the planet a little bit, creating like a nice curve shape to it. And you should start to see a little bit more of a purple hue on this left hand side. We'll then jump to our layers again and create another new layer. Tap on it, clipping mask it. We'll keep it as normal, but we'll go to our colors and we'll grab this color here, the middle of the second column. Now with the brush size again around about sort of the 15% mark, 15 to 17 there, I'm going to go ahead and go down this side here, making sure we don't go beyond the purple, but we just introduce a lot of lighting up in this top left area more so, and let that kind of blend out and fade out towards the bottom. Now we need to introduce a final lighting, so let's create another new layer, clipping mask it, change the blend mode though from normal to add, and we're going to introduce a much brighter edge. So let's bring that brush size right down. Let's bring it down to around about 8%, potentially even smaller than that, maybe around about 6. And again, light source primarily the brightest up here in the top left. So we want to kind of go down the edge here. And as you get down towards the end, you kind of want to just let that tail off a little bit. So let's start up here, nice and bright, and just let that tail off like so. Now you may want to have a couple of attempts at this. You may want to start off really, really light like I've just done there. and maybe go over it a few times, maybe even with a slightly larger brush size, maybe a 10%. It will take a couple of attempts, and we're going to brighten that up in towards the top left. Now this is a little bit tricky because we don't necessarily know the level that we should go to quite just yet with our lighting, but this should hopefully give us a good starting point. There is one more new layer to introduce though for the planet, so we'll tap on a new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it. We'll go to our colors and we will grab the color in the bottom right of the palette. Soft airbrush, probably around about sort of the 20 to 25% range, and in the top right corner of our canvas we're going to go ahead and just slowly rotate outwards, keeping a nice soft blend to it, but darkening up this top right corner and revealing this area of the planet. So that's it for its lighting as such. Now there is another layer I want to introduce, and that's clouds. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to create a new layer that goes here. So it's underneath this overlay layer of the purple. We'll create a new layer. We're going to change the blend mode from normal to the option of color dodge. We're going to go to our colors and grab this color here, the middle of the fourth column. And we're going to go to our brush. We're going to go to the option of elements and clouds. Now the opacity is set to 41%. We want to first of all start off with a nice large brush size around about sort of 15% just to get started with. And we're going to add some clouds to this planet, and then we're going to twirl them, etc. afterwards. So start off really lightly and create some patches. So we want to patch in where we want our cloud work to be. You don't have to cover the entirety of the planet. You can just add in some large areas just to start with this larger brush size. So maybe like one or two fairly large areas, maybe a third one up here. I don't want it to be too symmetrical, but we can alter it later. We'll then go ahead and bring the brush size down to a 6% now, and in the gaps we can maybe focus some interesting shapes. So press really lightly and build up your patchwork. So build up your clouds, build up where they sit, what type of styling you want them to have, sort of lay the foundations and go over the top then of your larger ones. And light source is top left, so try to just sort of add some lighting where you kind of see all the little bumps and lumps in the cloud over here on this left hand side edge of some of these clouds. So here to there, maybe there's another little patch right beside it, just like so, and we'll introduce another little bit of highlight on there too. I'll introduce a cloud that's going to make its way in right from the edge, and slowly but surely you're going to really build up these cloud areas, and we're going to end up with some really lovely detailed sort of aesthetic to this. So take your time with it, don't overdo it, and don't feel like you need to fill in the entirety of it. You don't even have to do this stage if you don't want to. It's just my extra little change that I've done for a planet design on this occasion. I'm going to bring the brush size down to 3% now, and I'm looking to sort of land some large white areas and patches of them in these clouds, but sort of trying to focus them in certain areas that maybe give off that highlight sort of effect to it, and just a little bit of detail now. So really trying to focus in, lock in some of the aesthetic of some of these clouds. And maybe some of them don't quite look right, so maybe at this point you can then maybe let's create like a drag off from here. Let's create like as if this planet's rotating fairly quickly and the clouds are just being pushed around. So look at the difference in the build up and down here. So we'll do the same here, and not every bunch of clouds need to look the same. So you don't have to have, you know, this area here look exactly like this one. This one can look a little bit different. That's cool. Maybe we'll introduce like a smaller, very small area here and push that one too. Now they might look a little bit sort of flat, and that's where you can maybe add in a little bit of extra color around the whole top surface here, as well as these little extra patches here and there in the gaps. So like the odd little patch here and there. And what I mean is you can also add some additional whites on here just to maybe sort of add in that top down view, not so much a side view like we see on our planet looking up at the clouds. We want to kind of show all the top surfaces of all of these clouds in the sky as we're looking down on this planet. So we've got some interesting shapes here. I might introduce like a random white patch in here to kind of sort of change the gaps in there between the two. I don't want them to be like a staggered system almost. I want them to have different styles. And this one, I've linked them together now, creating some twirls and curls in here just to, again, make it a little bit different, adding some variety. And maybe I'll let this one run all the way up towards that left-hand side. So take a look. You may want to increase the opacity if you really, really want to chuck it in. But at this point, try to go back over some of your areas now and brighten them up even more. So press really firm and introduce some nice occasional bright patches, leave some a little bit more muted, and then move on. Leave that, move on to like this area here instead. Twirls and curls, little ripples, little wiggles, anything like that. But variety in your clouds will look great. Now taking a look at that, that looks really, really cool. I'm very pleased with how that looks. Maybe you could introduce some additional sort of streaks here and there, but it's always something you could redo if you wanted to. So once you get to your sort of final result, you may want to come back to this. We're then going to go up to our adjustments though. We're going to go to liquefy. The size is going to be fairly large to start with, so you may need to bring that down, but I'm kind of going off of the very light pressure here. So I'm just tapping and dragging a few times off towards the right hand side. So I'm twirling to the left, and to do that, just tap on your liquefy mode here and change it. You may want to use the option of push too, but I want to show some real cool sort of swells in here and like real windy sort of crazy environment on this planet. So I've really swelled it in this area here, and I'm kind of purposely swirling it and then pushing off towards the right hand side here to push the stream of the clouds off towards this right hand side here and push that one along as well. And you don't want to end up with too many like that, so maybe you then want to go ahead and bring the brush size down to say 31% and create some mini twirls here and there. You could even go ahead and bring that even smaller. Let's go down to say a 20% here and create some mini swells in here. And again, don't forget to drag them though. Really push them around, create some interesting twirls and curls here. So we're just holding down slowly and just pushing across, seeing what we can come up with that's not something that you could have potentially drawn yourself. Sometimes that's a really tricky skill to have in play, where sometimes you do need to utilize the tools in order just to create something a little bit different. If you were to try and draw these intricate kind of swells and curls, it may take a bit too long, but also maybe something that you get a little bit frustrated with potentially. But ultimately should end up with some really interesting shapes here, and push around a little bit. Again, change your blend mode to push if you want to, and maybe adjust it slightly and expand and do whatever you need to do to create a really cool, awesome sort of extra layer to these sort of designs that I've not done before. So I'm going to switch it to curl right this time and tap a few times here. And this one here, you can see the sort of settings here at the bottom. If I tap, I'll get some of these mini sort of twirls in there as well. And that can be something that, again, looks really, really interesting. I'm going to leave this area here. I love that kind of aesthetic. So I'll just bring the brush size down a tad and try and tap and create some mini swells in here, some ripples almost. Again, just to create some interesting look to it. And it's looking very, very cool. Can hold that down, swell that out to the right. And I think I've got to the point where I'm really happy with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and tap on my adjustments when I'm done, and we've added some clouds to our planet. Let's then just go ahead and start to work on the background for a minute. So let's go to our layers. The planet is technically all done with. So if you need to, tap on the group and go to the option of flatten. We're going to go ahead and create 2 new layers. Swipe from left to right, group them together, and we'll call it background. So we'll call it background. And then we'll collapse that group down, or hold down on the group and drag it to the very bottom. Now the bottom layer out of the 2, we're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here, the top of the 4th column, and we're going to set our brush to the option of airbrushing and the soft brush. With a nice large brush size, probably around about the 40% mark, we're going to press really lightly. And in this top left area of the sky, we're going to blend down in a little bit of blue. There we go, just a nice flat coat, but it's nice and sort of feathered as it makes its way towards the bottom. Okay, nice and light. Then we're going to go to our layers. We're going to go up to the empty one above, change its blend mode from normal to add. We're then going to start to build up a bit of a glow here, but I want it to be slightly off sort of camera, almost out of the scene a little bit. So I'm going to build up a nice light glow up there to start with. Push that across just a little bit more. Now you're seeing how the lighting's coming across, and that's where this lighting is now being shown. So you can get an idea now for why that's being lit like it was. I'm going to go round just a few times just to feather that out a bit more. And then I'm going to go ahead and create another new layer. Tap on that and change its blend mode to the option of add. And then we're going to focus this one up in the top left a tiny bit more. So we're going to tap away. We're going to bring the brush size down to about 20% on this occasion. And up in the top left, we are going to add something that's slightly out of frame. There we go. Now, again, your background's somewhat done with in terms of creating this gradient effect, so you're more than welcome to collapse it down, tap on it and flatten it. We're going to move on to the rings now for the planet. So we're going to go above it. We're going to create 2 new layers. I'm going to swipe from left to right and we're going to group them together. We'll rename this and we'll call it rings. If we go to the bottom layer out of the 2, we're going to go to our colors. I'm going to grab this color here, the middle of the second column. Our brush wants to be changed to the option of organic, and we're going to use the twig brush. And using the twig, we're going to set the brush size to 58%. And the first thing I want you to do is, again, draw a circle that kind of goes as wide as you can make it. So hold your pen at the top, pop a finger on the screen and make sure it just doesn't go beyond the boundaries there. So you may want to rotate it if you can, but ultimately just try and fit that in first. Then grab your cursor, move it into the center. Now make sure snapping is turned on here in the bottom left. That'll allow you to see these 2 orange lines, which lets you know that that is perfectly centered in the middle of your design. Now I don't like this chunky edge down here, so I'm just going to go ahead and rotate it until I get to a point where I quite like the look of the thin line down here. So I'm going to go to around about this point. I've only rotated it slightly there then, so it's a little bit chunky on the right. That's fine. What we're then going to do is we need to go to the next layer above, and you're going to have to create multiple layers for the rings here just to slowly build up this process. So if we set the brush size to say 26%, let's start off with some smaller rings. So let's go ahead and draw in another circle in here. Keep your pressure somewhat nice and light, pop your finger on the screen, and as long as it's a perfect circle, go back to your cursor, move it into the center again, hit those orange lines every single time. And we're looking to try and build up the rings of the planet. So I'm going to make that a little bit smaller again. And this side over here is looking a little bit empty. That may or may not help us later on. Let's see how it goes. Let's then go ahead and do another new layer. And the brush size on this ring is going to be around about 58%. I'm going to start at the top, press nice and lightly just to try and, I want to try and make sure that the coat is nice and even all the way around. So I've gone around twice there. I'll pop my finger on the screen again, scale it up, but grab my cursor and just make sure it sits in the middle of our design. So sometimes it may change to blue because then it's looking at the other rings and trying to tell you you're actually in the center of this area here, if you leave it where it is. We'll tap on our cursor when we're done. We'll go ahead and create another new layer. We'll go to our brush, just making sure it's still 58%, which it is. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to start just behind the planet here, in fact, because that's going to actually get hidden. So I'm going to go round in a circle, pop my finger on the screen, scale it up, then I'm going to go ahead and grab my cursor, I'm going to move it into the center again, just trying to see now how everything starts to layer up. And to be honest, I prefer this right side than I do the left. That's fine. If you prefer one side in a minute, that'll actually work out quite nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and create another one. We can make this a little bit smaller. Let's try and create another one here. Pop our finger on the screen, scale that up, grab our cursor, put it in the center. Now I'm looking at that right side. Now I've got a side that I like the aesthetic of. I'm going to go ahead and see where we can sort of play with to introduce this one in. Tap on my cursor when I'm done. Now that looks awesome. Really pleased with how that looks. We've got all of these rings. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and pinch all of them together. So just pinch them into one layer. What we're then going to go ahead and do is we'll grab our cursor. We'll go ahead and start to warp this in order to get those where we need it. Now for a moment, just rotate it until the bottom area here is the side that you prefer the look of. So for me, I like the density of this. So rotate it first, then tap on your cursor. Now go back to your cursor and the box will have straightened itself up. Now you can go ahead and start to really warp this into perspective. So we're going to grab distort. We're going to go ahead and we're going to zoom out. We're going to need to be really zoomed out for this. We're going to follow the angle almost of the isometric line there. And we're going to bring this one out way down here. We're going to zoom out. We're going to bring this one all the way up to here. And look at how once you start to get that angle, it's going to start to wrap itself a little bit around the planet. Now, we also want to make sure that we kind of rotate that a tiny bit. In fact, we may need to flatten it down, bring that down a little bit. So you're going to need to sort of tinker around a little bit here to get the lines exactly where you want it around your planet. So zoom in a few times, rotate it if needs be, push those lines down towards the bottom left a little bit more if you want to. Slightly off screen, as you can see, is perfectly fine. Now looking at that, that looks really cool. Really happy with that angle. Maybe we could just bring that down a little bit to reveal a bit more of this. Keep messing around. Maybe you want to really kind of squeeze this in at the top, really narrow that in, and then they get a lot thinner in the distance. So keep tinkering, keep messing around until you find the look that you like the look of. Now I'm going to keep going until sort of just keep adjusting. So taking a look at mine, this is my final distort shape here. Now I'm going to tap on my cursor when I'm done and just make sure when you zoom in you're happy with it. Otherwise, of course, tap with 2 fingers to undo and go back and just triple check. Now at this point, we want to go ahead and just remove this line here from the planet. So we'll go ahead and we'll go into our planet. If you've merged it into one layer, it's still perfectly fine. Just tap on the main shape and go to the option of select. Make sure color fill is grayed out like it is and go to your layers. Go back up to the ring, grab your eraser, tap on your eraser and change it to something solid, a little bit more like an airbrush set to, soft airbrush is fine if you press really firm. So about 10% here. I'm just going to erase this and it will only go up to the line there. And I've got rid of that. Just triple check you've gone over it a few times. Tap on your selection tool when you're done. And now we can start to detail this a little bit more as well. Now the first thing I want to do is just adjust the colors before we add in some extra effects to it. So we're going to create a new layer. Let's collapse our planet down. We don't need that. Let's tap on this layer here and clip it to the rings. We'll go to our colors and grab the color here in the top of the 4th column. Your brush wants to be back to airbrushing and the soft brush. I've got the brush size set to around about 20%. And just over here on the right hand side, we just want to kind of darken up the rings just over here as they blend round a little bit, imagining that the lighting's being blocked a little bit. So they're a bit darker over here. And then also we want to introduce some additional lighting as well. So we're going to go ahead and create another new layer, tap on it, and we're going to go to clipping mask. We're going to tap on the blend mode and change it to the option of add. We'll go back to the color that we had before, so the middle here of the 2nd column. But bring that soft airbrush right down to around about 4%. And what I want you to do is I want you to sort of pick an area of your sort of design here. So I'm going to find these rings here, for example, and I'm just going to paint them in really, really lightly if I can. If you press too firm, you'll get white. That's still not a problem, but I just want you to be aware of that. And then kind of bring that color round a little bit over to here, and then obviously in the shadows, let it die out. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to introduce some sort of variation here. So I'm going to go to 3% here, press really lightly, follow that around. And I think I may even just sort of blend this in over here so that these ones over here kind of lose the color a bit. Bring the brush size back down to a 2%. Let's see if I can pick out another line. Let's go for this. Let's go here. So there's a bit of a gap in between. So we'll bring that one all the way up into there. Bring this around here. And again, as it makes its way around here, you can bring the color around a little bit. Again, try to keep it a little bit lighter with your pressure so it doesn't go to white. And as you get through to the shadows, just let it pass and sort of disperse over there. And then I think that should be everything. Let's maybe go for a really small 2% here and try another line. Let's go for another one. Following this all the way around. And it doesn't have to come right in front of us here, but it will look quite cool later on. So let's go ahead and just try and brighten that up the tiniest bit. And again, let that fade out as it gets towards the shadows. So now we've got some cool variety in the actual lines themselves. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to merge those layers together. So pinch them together into one layer. We'll then go ahead and we will tap on this layer. We're going to add a mask. We're going to invert the mask. So tap on it and invert it. So it's white, which means all of it's showing. If we invert it to black, it all hides. Now if we go ahead and change our color, so making sure you're on the mask, go to your color and double tap in the top left to select white. We're going to paint in what we want to see again. We're going to go back to our brush. We're going to go into materials and we're going to use the noise brush here. I've got the size set to 63%. And we're going to try and sort of vaguely remember where our lines are. So just sort of start drawing in and you'll be able to reveal them. And now they'll have this beautiful speckled effect to them. So we're going to bring in our lines again. You're going to press a little bit firmer right in front of us here. We obviously want the lines to come back into play. In the distance, you may want to think about potentially keeping them a little bit sort of faded in comparison. But sort of build these up. Bring these back into play so we get this lovely speckled effect. And having sort of variations in the lighting will look great. So just push that up a tiny bit. Again, where it gets right back there, you can introduce it if you want, like a little bit on the edge, but maybe let a few of the lines be a little bit more faint. And I'm going to make sure we bring in the lines over here on the right hand side just so we can definitely see them. So I'm kind of bringing them into play a bit more. But I love this effect. I think it looks so, so cool. And let's just make sure there's some random brighter patches running through it, because if you go over it a few times you'll be able to build up the color and reveal the brightness of it again. But I like it to have some variation in there. Now, what we're then going to do is we're going to go ahead and go to the layer. When you're happy with it, pinch the mask to the layer. We're then going to go ahead and go to our smudge tool. We're going to tap on our smudge tool and use the soft airbrush. I've got the opacity set to 57%. And I've got the size set to 7. Just very lightly in this back area here, we're going to go down these lines a few times and try and sort of blur them out essentially. So we're smudging, but we're actually blurring at the same time. So we're just blurring them out a little bit, following the curve of the lines, okay? So as you make your way around, just kind of blend them out. Then we're going to do a general blur. So we're going to go up to our adjustments. We're going to go to Gaussian blur, and we're going to swipe from left to right. And we can add in a lovely little bit of blur here, probably around about sort of the 4% range will look pretty good. You should get some detail still in there then. So I'm going to go to around about 3 or 4. I'm going to go for, let's go for a 3%. And we'll tap on our adjustments when we're done. Now, before we move on to the rocks, I want to go ahead and introduce some stars in the sky. So we're going to create a new layer. We'll drag it all the way out and we'll put it, you can put it in your background group if you've still got it, or you can put it here as an empty layer and create another one and swipe from left to right and group them together. We'll call it stars. We're going to go to the top layer out of the two. We're going to go ahead and introduce some stars, of course, in the sky. So we're going to go to our colors. Now I'm going to grab this blue in the bottom left. We're going to go back up to our brush and we're going to go back into the option here of luminance, and we're going to use the light pen. Now I always keep my brush size for the light pen maxed out and the opacity too, and then I can press lightly in certain areas to introduce some stars, and then I can press a little bit firmer to introduce some with a little bit of a glow. But I'm going to just fill out my sky here, and it may take a little bit of time to do so, and we can always do my typical trick of just duplicating the layer once you've set out a good layout of your stars, and then sort of duplicate it, make it smaller and drag them around. Don't be afraid to put the odd one through the rings here, that's perfectly fine, but not too many that sort of disrupt the rings and their kind of lighting. And we're tapping with different varying amounts of pressure. We could even change our color. Let's go ahead and grab the light blue here in the middle of the second column. That may give us a little bit more of a white twinkle to these ones rather than a little bit of a blue, but that will give us some nice variety in our sky or space scene. Tapping a few times, try not to make sure that I drag the pen, so trying to prevent that, and also trying to make sure that as I go, I'm not trying to create too many patterns. I don't want areas to be too repetitive, and I want them to have their own sort of individual spacing. Now I can actually go ahead and turn off my drawing guide if I want to get the full impression of my design so far. That's looking nice. I'll introduce a few in the gaps here, but I'll make them really small so that then again not disrupting the rest of the design. Awesome. And then when you're happy, you can go ahead and swipe the layer to the left and duplicate it. Grab your cursor, grab uniform and scale it down in size too. You've got some really tiny stars here, and then just sort of pop them into your design potentially somewhere that fits. So rotate it, see what sort of looks okay. Try not to make it too dense in certain areas, but swipe it to the left and keep swiping it until you rotate it enough times and you've got a nice full area of coverage in your space scene here. I always love this effect because it packs in a lot of detail and just fills out the rest of the design. Now it's time to introduce the rocks. So we're going to go ahead and go above the rings here. We're going to create 2 new layers again, swipe from left to right and group them together. And of course we'll rename this and we'll call it rocks. We're going to go to the top layer out of the 2 for a moment, and we're going to go to our, in fact we'll go to the bottom layer, sorry, out of the 2. We'll go to our colors and we will double tap in the top left for a moment to select white. We're going to go to our brush, we're going to go to calligraphy and the monoline brush. Now I'm going to tap on the monoline brush because I usually have the stabilization fairly high, likewise the streamline. I'm going to bring them down a little bit just so I can get some potentially more jitters there in my brush. It's not mandatory, but it's just in case. And I've got the brush size set to 9% there. We're going to introduce some rocky shapes here of some breakaways in our sky. Drag and drop the color in, and that's all we want to try and do, create varying sizes. So that last one the first one, should I say, I made is going to be kind of my main guide as to say, okay, this one here is the largest out of all of them. I don't necessarily want to go any larger than that. And so all the rest just need to have a variety of sort of shapes and sizes that don't exceed that. So we introduce some smaller ones in here, And honestly, the size, the scope of the sort of texture, it's not really anything that's too serious, to be honest with you. You can make long ones like that. You could create sort of shards like that instead in that space. They can exceed obviously the rings. They don't need to sit within those boundaries. So you can just drag a few out here, create random scatterings of them. Now I may even in fact make this one a little bit bigger. Now I can just go to my selection tool, go to freehand and draw a circle around it, tap on the dot, grab my cursor and just scale that up in size. Just again, so it's the more dominant one. We kind of have a focal kind of point there almost. Create some small ones there. Now try not to pack in the small ones, just like how we just did the stars where we'll duplicate the layer and sort of fill out the rest of the scene. We're going to go ahead and do that with these rocks anyway. So once you've sort of laid out your whole initial sort of main shapes, you can duplicate the whole layer and all the effects that we'll add to it and fill out the rest of your scene accordingly. So without doing that too early, you will have a chance to do that. So a couple of really small ones off in the distance. We'll introduce some more here. I think we can maybe introduce one right off the canvas there. Going right to the edge sometimes is nice. I really like that kind of a look to it. And can I take a look at my design? Let's see where else we could go ahead and there's obviously space here for one as well. Maybe make that one a little bit sharper. Maybe another one in there, just a small one. Again, I want there to be gaps. I don't want it to be too packed in certain areas. Maybe sort of let's introduce like one here fairly close to this one, which may be a problem, but we'll fix it. And then maybe there's a couple of small ones here as if to say that there were maybe a collision here and they've all smashed off of each other potentially. Let's make up whatever story that we want to introduce for our design. Now that is looking pretty cool. I think we could go ahead and maybe introduce like a sharp point in there. Drag and drop the color in. So not a lot to it in terms of purposely adding things in certain areas, just trying to add in some asteroids. So once we've done that, we're then going to want to go ahead and introduce some of the colors that sit in that space. Now I don't want you to get rid of the white just yet. So what we'll do is we'll tap on this layer here and we'll clipping mask it just the same way with the planet. I don't want you to lose these dark tones in the sky and not be able to find your rocks. So on this empty layer that's clipped now, we're going to go to our colors and grab this gray here, the top of the 6th column. We'll go back to our brush library and we're going to go ahead and go into the option of charcoals. I'm going to use the burnt tree brush. I'm going to set the size 10%, looks a little bit large. We may want to just go for this 4%, but we'll see what it looks like once we start adding in some color tone. Now, light source is up in the top left. So just use a very small one as a very easy, straightforward area. We're going to introduce some lighting here. Now, believe it or not, that's your lighting. So when it comes to changing the color of the rock in a minute, at the minute that looks like a shadow, but it will be the lighting. So all of these kind of asteroids, we're just looking to add in some random areas where we think that the lighting on this left hand side is going to be dashed along the side of some of these rocks. So just the left hand side of some of these, we'll just add in some little areas here. You can create multiple avenues, especially with these larger ones. You can create sort of gaps in here that'll look great. Maybe a little bit down there too, and a tiny little bit on the right. That's okay on that occasion. In the really small ones, you might not be able to sort of detail them too much, and that's fine. You don't need to sort of lay out random areas potentially in the really small ones. Let's see what else we can do here. So I'm going to run a line through this one and then add some on the top edge. Again, it will come around in a minute as to what it actually looks like. If you drew this one too close, maybe draw a selection around it just in case. And that goes for all of them. We're just adding in little areas. Maybe on some of them you keep the lighting a little bit less. You know, you don't have to add it in packs every single time. So here I'm going to go, for example, along the top edge here, add in some lighting on there. I'm going to sort of bring some down here and leave a gap, and maybe we introduce like a little bit here, and maybe there's a path that runs down into there. So you're trying to create the random scattering of how the landscape of this rock is set out. So it can be a bit tricky to do in this sort of phase of it, but you can always come back in a moment and adjust it once we add in the dark tone again. So that should be enough texture on there. And that's all this is. This is really us just adding in some texture onto our rocks here. And again, they're set to white because I didn't want you to lose them against the background of the sky. I keep saying sky, but it's not, is it? It's the space. So taking a look at that, we've got a couple over here, and exactly why we would have definitely lost those if I hadn't done this. So taking a look at that, that is every single one colored to an extent. We can go ahead and go down to the rocks, the white layer, tap on it and alpha lock it. Go to your colors, go to this color here, the bottom or the middle, should I say, of the 6th column, and go back to the layer, tap on it and fill it. So now, if we go back up to the gray, so the clip layer, and go back to the same color, the top of that 6th column, you may want to sort of take a look at your sort of asteroids here and see if there's any areas that you want to get into, maybe adjust some of the lighting, increase it, decrease it, whatever you want to do. I'm fairly happy with how they all look, so I'm going to leave them as they are. Now, we can actually go ahead and add some further highlight to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer, tap on it, I'm going to clipping mask it. I'm going to change the blend mode from normal to add, and we may need to bring the opacity down of this. I'm going to bring it down straight away to about 70% so we can go up or down. Now, I don't want to draw outside of the grey areas that we've added on these rocks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap on the grey areas and select them. Again, make sure color fill is grayed out. Go back to your layers, go up to this new add layer and tap on it and add a mask. Then tap on your selection tool because we're done with it. Tap on the layer, making sure you're not on the mask and you're on the layer. Go to your color and let's grab the sort of middle tone here in the 4th column. And we're looking now for our big asteroids, and we're looking to try and add in some highlights. Now, what we've done there is we can't paint anywhere else that is not on the gray area. So you can only sort of sprinkle in some highlight here on these areas only. So try to sort of keep it kind of loose and don't add in too much onto here. And again, you do not have to add this onto every single rock here. You can add in tiny little specks here and there. You don't have to add it in on every single one. So try and sort of come up with a story in your mind potentially when you're looking at these and go, does that one block that one? Yeah, so let's leave it. Let's add in a little bit on here and just a tiny bit again on that left edge. So certain areas may get a little bit brighter. The ones in the distance, maybe we can add some specks to as well. Maybe these ones here don't get any love, so this one here gets a little bit on top of here. Introduce a bit on there too. And this one here at the back, I'm thinking we could add in the tiniest bit on the edge and that's it. Because again, it's way off and potentially even in the shadows. So this main one here, let's see if we can maybe change up how this looks a tiny bit. Now that one's probably got a little bit too much on it. So I'm just going to grab my eraser. I can use the soft airbrush if I want to and just kind of fade them out and just focus them in certain areas a little bit more. And you can go back in and of course redo them if you want to. Now I will actually go ahead and go back to the grey area here for that space. I'm going to grab my eraser, tap on the eraser and change it to the option of charcoals. And we're going to change it to the burnt tree with a 4% brush size. I'm just adjusting this one. So you won't need to do this necessarily because it will be different for you. But I just don't particularly like the aesthetic of this main one. This is our main kind of focal point of all of these rocks as well. So I want it to have a certain look to it. I want it to have a nice characteristic that really when I look at it, I can see its sort of flow and different sort of avenues. So maybe even with a 2% brush size here, I could maybe hack away into it in a bit more of a detailed manner potentially and create additional sort of areas of sharpness and avenues of crevices on the surface. You know, you could really detail it if you want to. Now, as I mentioned, we can then go ahead and go to our rocks group here. Swipe it to the left and duplicate it for a minute and tap on the bottom one out the two. Tap on it and flatten it so it will make it into one layer for us. What we'll then go ahead and do is grab our cursor. We're going to just bring it in for a minute and just move it up here because we just want to quickly identify. If we tap on our cursor when we're done and we go to our eraser, we want to identify any that were right up against the edge because we're going to have to get rid of them. So we can go ahead and maybe set our eraser to airbrushing in the soft airbrush. We just want to get rid of these ones here if they were sort of half chopped because Procreate, if you go off the edge of the canvas, that doesn't exist anymore over there. You lost the data for it. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we will turn off this layer for a minute. We'll swipe it to the left though and duplicate it and group them together. And we'll just call this extra rocks. Nice and simple. So extra rocks. Now we'll leave this top one here turned off, but the bottom one, turn it on. Grab your cursor, scale it down in size using uniform, and you can make it really, really small. You can chuck it in the gaps. So take a look at your design and just see one for symmetry and stuff like that. Like you want to avoid having certain ones look fairly straightforward and like you have definitely duplicated it. That one there is looking a bit a little bit too much like it might be. So I'm going to bring my eraser down, should I say, and I'm going to get rid of it. So that was my large one here. The small ones, they are so sort of unique and very small and clustered together that I think we can just swipe that to the left and keep duplicating it and just rotate it. Just again, making sure that the lighting though is still pointing up into that top left area though. You don't want to sort of make it rotate to the point where the lighting doesn't make any sense. I can bring that a little bit lower down, so we've got some more interesting ones down there too. We can move them up there, and as they get to further away, we can start to scale them down in size. So all I'm doing is just duplicating the layer, not really thinking about it too much. Just want to sort of add in a loose scattering of them, zoom in and maybe get rid of a few if you want to sort of lower the density and the volume of them so there's not quite as many. Here could definitely do with some extra. So what I'm going to do is I've got this one here at the top. I can swipe it to the left and duplicate it and turn it on, and that's my really large ones up there. I can bring that down. I can push this into this space here. I can rotate it a smidge, and let's see if I can sort of position some maybe like that. Let's go smaller than that. Let's go smaller than that though. Let's go down to say this level here, and then again I'll grab my eraser and just erase a few of them if I think that we're getting too much of a obvious repetition there. So this is just going to be a really fun stage for you just to keep duplicating, seeing what you can come up with, scale them down, create lots of small areas of debris in there, and as many sort of areas of detail as you can pack in. You may even want to sort of redo the whole rock stage again if you want, and just to see if you can fit some in there that are new and unique that you've not done before. You can also go ahead and go up to this layer here at the very top that we kept as a sort of backup. If you like a particular one, you can always go ahead and grab your selection tool. Let's go ahead, for example, and we'll grab these three over here. Tap on our dot, go to copy paste. I can go back to my layer and I've got a new one here. So I can drag it underneath that one that we want to keep at the top and turn it off again. Grab my cursor and I can just move it over here into this gap. Again, trying to just triple check. I'm always looking around, just trying to see if I've done any sort of repetition too much. And then I can always grab my sort of rock here, tap on the dot, grab the cursor for it and just move it into there. So we've got a little bit of a unique layout then compared to the opposite side. And what you can also go ahead and do is, if you're struggling with layers at the minute, by the way, and you're kind of happy with the layout so far, just pinch these ones together. It's okay for a minute. Create a new layer. Just drag the rocks that you just created above it. And then this empty layer here, go to your colors and grab the bottom color in the 6th column there. And making sure we go back to our brush and we go back to the monoline brush. Bring the brush size maybe down to about 5% and just get in here and just draw in some really dark, unlit areas of rock. So you could bring the brush size even smaller if you want to, down to like a 2%, and create lots and lots of debris in here. So small areas, little specks here and there. Try not to keep them too rounded. So maybe keep bringing the brush size down the smaller you want to go with it. But you can add in small areas of sort of debris in there that are unique and interesting. Pack out the scene a little bit more, but they don't get any lighting, and that's going to look really, really cool. And you kind of want to lay them out a little bit in a sense that they layer on top of the rings, because the rings underneath give you the contrast for these dark sort of specks to sit on top of. And in the distance as well, bring your brush size right down to a 1% and just maybe try and create some in the distance. Like so. And if they get really, really small but too rounded, just go to your eraser, tap on your eraser and use something. In fact, you could even use the monoline brush and bring that all the way down and start chopping away at this dot that you created to like sharpen up some edges like so. So maybe just chop an edge off like that. And when you zoom all the way out, it's tiny anyway, it doesn't really matter. Now let's go back to my brush. Let's introduce some more back there. And again, maybe these are large ones, but they're in the distance. So we'll just introduce some back there, chopping away every time. So I'm just switching between my eraser and my pen every time. I draw one in, chop the edge off, draw one in and chop the edge off. As they get really far away, we'll just sort of allow that just to disappear. Now they're looking a bit too uniform, so I'll get rid of that one. And I'll get rid of that one, in fact, and we'll do it again. We'll draw a different one in here and then erase it. You're always looking for kind of breaking down those patterns and obvious use of patterns. Now for me, that is done. But there is one little trick I want to show you right at the end. If we go right to the top of our layers, we go ahead and swipe down with 3 fingers and we go to copy all. And we swipe down with 3 fingers and we go to paste. You'll then get your entire design on one layer. Now you can, if you want to, then start to make some sort of wild adjustments here. So for example, if you go to hue, saturation and brightness, I personally always lean on the side of a desaturated design. However, if you want to, you could go ahead and boost this saturation right up to say like 80% here. And it still, in my mind, looks really cool. And I think it even looks cooler if you bring that down to 46%. We get a bit more of like a tealy, a few more greens in there as well. So please feel free to mess around with all of these selections. I would leave the brightness because brightness ruins your contrast. You may make your design too washed out or too dark by adjusting that. But by all means, please adjust your design. Maybe you want a bit more of a greeny look to it. I really like the 46%. That looks really good. And I think if I go back to 50, every time I do this, it looks black and white almost. So I then want to try and find a balance of like say 75%, for example, and I can tap on my adjustments when I'm done. And because we set it on a separate layer, it's up here and you've still got all of your work underneath. So you don't need to worry, you can just create a new variation. So if I pinch with 2 fingers and I go full screen with 4, we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed today's design. As always, make sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram, as well as come and share your designs in my Discord. It's completely free to join, and you can now join in with the weekly doodle challenge as well. As always, a massive thank you to all of my supporters over on Patreon who help make these videos possible. If you want to support the work that I do here on the channel, as well as get access to a catalogue of over 100 Patreon exclusive tutorials, you can come and join me over on Patreon, where I post 3 exclusive tutorials every single month to my catalogue, and as well as sneak peeks, early access and much more. So if you want to support the channel, hit the link in the description down below. And if you like this video here on YouTube, you'll love this one on the screen now. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.